What's going on, guys? Zane here with Everything Vive. I want to welcome you back for another episode. In today's episode, we actually interview Justin Larrabee, one of the co-founders for the game Just in Time. And if you are listening to this on the day that it is released, which is or should be July 27th, the game is out now and today. So make sure you check it out. We chat with Justin about the inspiration behind the game, some of the levels that they didn't include, the just hilariousness of how the game came about. It's a really great conversation, and Ronnie and I and Damon, who joined us on the conversation as well, we can't say enough about the game. It's a lot of fun. It's unique, and for those who've been listening along, you know we don't throw that term around lightly. It's really refreshing to find a game that has some originality to it and takes a lot of what makes VR cool and combines it together and packages it as well as the guys at Just in Time Incorporated did. So without further ado, just going to jump into the game. I will say make sure to check the show notes because we're going to have links there, obviously, to the game on Steam, but also if you are listening to this during the launch weekend, so like I said, July 27th through the end of the weekend, there will be a link for the giveaway that they are doing, and I think that includes Steam gift cards, it includes obviously copies of the game, and I believe the grand prize is the opportunity to have your own avatar or a character made after you in the game. So make sure you guys check that out, and just enjoy the game. For now, without further ado, we will jump right in. Justin, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Hi, guys.
Hey, what's going on? This is Zane. I'm here with Ronnie. Ronnie, how you doing?
I'm doing great as always. Really excited to interview Justin.
we all are. And on the call with us as well is Damon. Damon, I'm so excited to have you on this call too, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I think this is number 3. This is lucky number 3.
Well, hopefully it'll be many more. Because you were the one that brought this game to us, and Ronnie and I have been talking about it nonstop since he got to my place prepping for the interview. Justin, I want to say let's just start from the top. If you can tell us a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more about Second Wind Interactive, and maybe just the inspiration for the game, how it came about.
Yeah, definitely. So Ryan Drag and I, we started Second Wind, I want to say back in September. And before that, we had worked at Backflip Studios here in Boulder for about close to 8 years. So we had quite the run because when we started, we were only 6 people. And by the time him and I quit, we were up to 150. So you can imagine it was this just wildly different over time. Kind of the motivation that happened over time was, we really loved mobile for a while. But then kind of it evolved towards the whole free-to-play thing, and it's just not, like, we're gamers, so it really wasn't our bread and butter. So we kind of been hoping for a while to kind of strike out and do something really out there and not also have to kind of care about maybe being politically correct or whatever that may be. So we quit and then, took a whopping 3 weeks off and jumped right in and started. I knew it was going to be tough to come up with an idea because we had started using the Vive when it came out, and we had been going to the Game Developer Conference for a while. We had seen kind of all like the VR headsets, the Oculus DK2, and it was cool, but the DK2 made me horrifically nauseous. So I kind of wrote VR off, and I hadn't had a chance to try the Crescent Bay prototype for Vive. Mm-hmm. So when we actually got the Vive, played it, it was mind-blowing. I was like, okay, VR is real. This is actually a thing, and I am wildly impressed, and I didn't get nauseous. This is great. So it kind of seemed like a no-brainer to hop in there because it was like, it's new, it's fresh. There's not a lot of, there's a lot of room to explore. So fast forward, 5-6 months when we actually sat down to start doing something, we had this kind of blank canvas and had this idea like, well, okay, how are we going to come up with a lot of good ideas? So we kind of challenged each other. We're like, each of us are going to come up with 50 ideas. And we've got 2 weeks, and they have to be 50 real ideas, not just like variations on the same idea. So we'll meet again in 2 weeks. And the idea being that we picked the number so that it would sound painful. Like we wanted
50 is a lot.
yeah, 50 is a lot, and it's kind of John Cleese from Monty Python.
Yeah.
He's given some talks actually on creativity, and one of his points is, if you want to try and find some really creative ideas, you need to get past kind of the obvious ones.
Huh.
So
that reminds me.
Really
that reminds me real quickly of what was it? The little thing with Steve Jobs where didn't he ask everyone to come up with like ideas, and then like at the first meeting he had everyone write those ideas on the board, and then he's like, all right, throw these out. I don't want any of those. Now let's go back to it.
What's funny is like SNL, they'll do 100 sketches a week, and they'll use 6 or 7, and the rest go in the garbage. They don't reuse them.
But sorry to interrupt. Go continue. Okay. So you had the 50 ideas.
No. Yeah, so I mean, the idea being that, okay, it's going to be painful. And I'll be perfectly honest, like, I don't consider myself a creative person. It is, like, brutal to sit down and come up with 50 ideas. The first 15, no problem. And then after that, it was, okay, here's 5, here's 4, here's 3, until it's, like, down to the wire, and you finally get that last one. So we met and went over all these 50 ideas. Long day. We're like, okay, we're going to go home. We're each going to pick our top 20. So we go home, we do that, we meet again, kind of, a few days later, start discussing that. Then we're like, okay, let's narrow this down to 10. And then it was 7. And then it was 5. And then we're like, okay, 5 of those 100 ideas, were actually a game. What we found is when you're creating a lot of ideas, usually you have an idea for a mechanic, but not a game.
Mm-hmm.
So we immediately ended up discarding like probably 60% of the ideas just because that was the kind of the criteria we ran into. But really what we found was that 5 ideas out of that 100 really had like a kind of a soul to them. And so we went and spent 2 weeks and prototyped all 5 of those games. And then we met and pretty much decided of those 5 we actually prototyped. A bunch of them were fun. There was just this one in particular that eventually became Just in Time Incorporated. That was the one. It felt like it had the most promise. And actually, what inspired it, and it's the source code repository is still called Quicksilver because it's the scene from X-Men: Days of Future Past in the kitchen. Quicksilver.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Okay. Yep.
So cool.
That was the original inspiration.
And just to put what you're saying into context, like around that time when you were doing these when you were coming up with the ideas and then prototyping the 5 that you guys chose, I mean, what was the state of consumer level VR at that time? Like, was there a lot out? Had you played a lot of VR, or were you guys just kind of coming up with a lot of these ideas based on, a few demos that you had gotten a chance to play?
I'd say, I guess it was August and we had gotten our VIVs back in, I believe it was March. Okay. So we had played a lot of the content that was out there. Space Pirate Trainer was mind blowing, just awesome. Kind of, it's been a blur now as to what came out when, but I think we identified early on, a couple of genres that were like, hey, these are pretty cool. The caveat being there's probably gonna be a lot of them. And so I kind of lumped like wave shooters under that, especially. Like I do like wave shooters a lot, but almost a year ago, we're like, if we fast forward a year, there's probably going to be a lot more of them, and it will be harder to compete. So that whole genre was basically just off the table, which added some additional challenge to the idea generation because it was kind of a good go-to. We had a lot of themes, a lot of other ideas, some of which I can't even remember now. But I think more what we wanted to do, and it makes me happy every time I hear somebody say it because it's just been the anxiety as you build up towards release kind of starts to creep in, and it's, have we communicated our concept, and do people think it's like, a unique experience? We wanted to just make sure that we're adding something to the VR market that kind of elevates it. And I don't mean that in a pretentious way. That sounded pretty pretentious. I just mean like, if we can explore a new genre, awesome. If we can kind of mix and mash something up and people really enjoy it, like, to me, that's a job well done. But to hear people actually enjoy it, it's great.
Just to quickly cut in, that's actually the one thing that I kept saying to Ronnie, during our game talk and during this, before we jumped on the call, is that we play a lot of games, just and maybe just compared to the regular Vive user out there, but just in terms of like reviewing the games and getting through all the stuff, we play a lot of games, and the one thing that sticks out to me is especially like whenever a game catches my attention because it's so creative and unique. So just, I mean, the 50 ideas or 100 ideas that you guys had, I mean, I think that definitely bore some fruit for you guys, because both Ronnie and I were actually just, we can't stop talking about how unique the game is, how like nobody's really messed with this concept before. We've messed, there've been other games out there that have like dealt with time travel or going back and forth, or, things in bullet time, but,
and the execution, I think.
That too.
Just to, I mean, give my input just a bit. I mean, as far as, we've seen some of these ideas in other games before, but the way that they're meshed into your game in a very unique and compelling way, and you can tell a lot of time and effort was thought into, or put into, how you would craft the story with the mechanics, with it's very well packaged. And I haven't seen, I mean, for all the games, there have been games recently with some mechanics that remind me of Just in Time. There have been some games that have, good aesthetics or good graphics, or, they're fun, they're easy to get into. But I haven't seen any games, honestly, in months, probably not since really the Vive launched, that put everything together in such a cohesive package the way your game does, to where, stepping away from the game, like a lot of times we're reviewing games to, get through it, to get our take, and then, be able to give some opinions and then move on. Your game is one where I did not want to stop. I had to stop because, I had to leave to come over here and do this interview. And the other thing is that I knew instantly, like out of the hundreds of games that I've played, that this is one that's jumped to, the top 5, just handful of games that I feel comfortable enough to where everyone that's going to get into the game is going to have such a good experience that this is something I want to demo for people when they're trying the Vive for the first time or second time, or, there's a lot of stuff that out there that's kind of half baked, and Just in Time is not a game like that.
I mean, that was a constraint we set upon ourselves kind of early, is that, we wanted to ship a game that we felt like kind of had a, like you said, kind of a cohesive package. I wanted to feel like when you've completed the game that you actually completed a full game, and feel like you're part of this world. Now, I mean, we're not remotely heavy at all with the story, obviously, but I feel like that theme kind of opened the game up.
More theme than story, I should say. But I mean, sometimes story is more, a mixture of like brand, like the Just in Time kind of, Just in Time Incorporated or whatever it is that you call it, like the theme and the branding that you guys put around every aspect, it makes it feel like what you're doing has purpose, and you kind of add your own stories to it as you're going from mission to mission, if that makes sense. I know a lot of people talk about that, oh, you're creating your own story when you're playing the game, and but like the simple things that you guys did so well in this, I think makes that, evident to anyone playing, like from the beginning to the end. Like I was never confused on what was going on, and I had a smile on my face the whole time I was playing. And like I said, I didn't want to stop.
You wouldn't, you wouldn't believe how long it took to get the initial, sequence and kind of introduced in the world. It took so long, like just the initial tutorial. I mean, if there's one thing that we definitely did right over the course of development, it was we had people play testing it constantly. And what we also made sure to do was when we would have people play test, we actually had friends that were like, hey, I really want to play your game. And we'd tell them, sorry, we need you to wait 2 months because we want a fresh opinion. Like once you've had a person play it once, essentially you can't get their first impression back. No matter what you do to the game, almost like you've kind of spoiled it, which is great, especially if they've had fun. But as you go down, you need to see what's the new player's experience. To give a perfect example, the second kind of tutorial experience where you learn how to grab a bullet and aim it.
Yeah.
That didn't go in until the end of May. Like we had everything else kind of locked down, feeling great, the initial tutorial, all that. And what we kept running into is people would be dropped into that level that's totally not Trump. They get dropped into that. They get dropped into that level, and something, 80% of people, no problem. They grab the bullet, they aim it, they see the laser sight, and we try and put as much context around that action as possible. And that other, 20%, they'd grab the bullet and immediately throw it. And they were just, missing that concept. And, it was frustrating in some sense, but not in like the, oh man, why are they so bad? It was more like we failed. We failed at communicating what you're supposed to do. And so at no point, we kind of just had to decide at the last minute there, relatively speaking, where the project was, to like, okay, we need to tutorialize this. And the concern being that you're adding this whole, and this was one of Ryan's concerns, is, you're kind of interrupting the flow a little bit with the initial experience. We want to get you into that headquarters area as fast as possible, so it the world kind of opens up for you.
That's ironic you say that, though, because one of the things when I was playing it for the first time, and again, this is somebody that, plays a lot of Vive games on a regular basis, and I thought it was actually awesome that the tutorial was so short, like compared to I know from your perspective, you probably made it twice as long by adding, the bullet mechanic portion there, but compared to a lot of other games out there on Steam right now, it's very streamlined and quick. And now thinking about it, I think it was the right, like a lot of the stuff that isn't in the tutorial, I think are kind of obvious. And the ones that I probably would have been one of those people that would have wanted to throw the bullet, because I've played some other games that have mechanics where you throw a bullet. So, but I never did that once in the game, because the way you guys put it in there, like whatever you did, I don't know exactly.
Just made sense.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how you put it in the tutorial to where it taught me that I didn't need to throw it, that I could just let go.
The trackers, they're like the little tracker lines that come out. You're just like, oh, okay, I get it. It was very quick.
The big thing, actually, from watching some people too, it's and when we were working on it, it's very specific that a target comes out. It slides in, and then the bullet itself, when you grab it, is already oriented towards the target. And so what we hoped, and I think it was successful, was your brain goes, oh, I shoot it like a gun. And then if you fail enough times, that TV guy will keep reiterating exactly what you're supposed to do over and over until it sinks in. And most people don't even get him to talk on and on that far. I watched a few people.
Yeah, it didn't have. Yeah, no, it's interesting though, because like you said, that didn't happen to me. I got it, but going into the game and knowing that there was going to be a bullet throwing mechanic, I remember thinking when I first reached for the bullet that I was going to throw it back, and then I didn't do that.
Can you imagine? And can you imagine how annoyed you would be with the game if it didn't function the way you thought it should?
Yeah.
It would tarnish your initial impression. So, I mean, I think if we learned one thing from mobile, especially, it was that, and this is pretty true on mobile, you have about 30 seconds to capture somebody's interest. After 30 seconds, they're going to move on to the next thing, because there's just so much content on mobile, and most of it's free. So we looked at this. It's PC, so people have a little more tolerance. They're actually paying money for it, which is great. And so they're a little more invested when they get it. But if they play it, and let's say they get to the point where they're trying to grab this, throw this bullet in that clump level. They're trying to throw this bullet, and I've watched people do this. They throw it, and I see them getting upset. And it's funny because, some of these people would be friends that happen to this. And, you can see them, after you told them, and we would tell them how to do it after that they're like, oh, okay, yeah. You hear that and you're like, okay, yeah, they were annoyed. They think it sucks, basically.
Yeah.
And so that it really was a last minute decision to add that, because we can't, we're two guys making this game, and, we don't have a marketing team or anything like that. So the more people that we can get off the "this game sucks" wagon, the better off we'll be. And we want people to have kind of the experience that we want, because once they get that, then that's basically all the mechanics you need to know about to play the game.
Yeah, everything else, going on along the same. So you're talking about the concept of kind of hooking people at the beginning, and trying to streamline the tutorials. How do you go about, and I haven't played through the whole game yet or anything like that, but I do know that you unlock stages as you progress. How did you guys decide which ideas came first in the game, which ones came last, and kind of how do you go about figuring out how to progress the difficulty through the stages?
I guess it was hard for us a little bit so we did initially take the pass of, okay, let's try and rank these by rough relative difficulty. And we kind of found that it was tough because there were almost a few different categories of mission where, like, this one's more combat focused and this one's got a kind of a tricky puzzle, and they don't really, like, depending on the player, one's going to be hard or one's going to be easy. So we kind of within those separate categories put them ranked, and then told ourselves, like, looked at the progression rooms, the little side each room, and said, okay, we need a good selection of those different mission types. And more than that, some people have commented on how quickly you kind of get promoted out of the first room. Mm-hmm. The guiding, kind of the other guiding principle we looked at was, we don't want to hide some of our awesome content behind, some intro levels. We want to get people to have as much choice as possible. Maybe that means that some people just kind of don't bother completing a few missions because it's not their kind of thing. Regardless, I mean, I think we want them to just have the choice, basically. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to make sure that the first 3 kind of levels in that room kind of represented different awesome. At least, we hoped it would be seen as awesome. And that's why, the bridge escort mission is pretty wildly different than the fire jumper mission, and the rat outbreak level.
You mentioned the progression rooms and kind of how you get that first, you get your first access you get promoted, I guess, pretty early on in that first stage. I remember thinking as soon as and again, coming from someone that's played a lot of these games, how clever it was that you guys put a code on the outside of the door so that you get that tactile feel of pressing the code in to unlock it and moving on to how much thought, I guess, goes into making the game feel tactile, given that it's a VR game, and how much, because that is something that I think makes Just in Time stand out from a lot of the average titles that I've played on the Vive, in terms of whether it be like the clipboard, and being able to, push the button and have to physically hit the trigger, or I just noticed that there's a lot of things that you guys do really well in the game where you get that satisfaction that you're interacting with something.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, and I guess it probably was closer to maybe beginning of December, I think, we kind of made the decision, because before that, with the prototype, we kind of had this, magic wand style, the standard UI interface, like if you go into the dashboard in Steam, you got a little laser pointer and it's regular UI like that. And once we kind of nailed down the theme, it seemed to betray both the theme and kind of what we wanted to go for to be in this world, to have any kind of UI that involved a laser pointer. And so the clipboard was kind of the ultimate culmination of that decision, where it was like, okay, we need a UI for the game. How on earth are we going to do that? Because we have a lot of information to kind of do, to communicate, and we're going to have quite a bit of these things floating around. Mm-hmm. And so we were like, well, okay, I mean, you're an insurance agent, you're going to have a clipboard, probably. But this company is a weird combination of old and new, so I guess it's going to be a robo clipboard, and have kind of just junk moving around on it and sliding in and out. And that ended up being, I think if we hadn't done that particular idea for that UI, I don't think it would have felt as cohesive in the world. Because like you said, we had to look at each level, and what we actually ran into kind of over the course of play testing earlier in the year was that there were some objects in some of these levels that you couldn't interact with, or you expected a certain interaction when you used them or interacted with them, and it didn't happen, and people kind of, they felt cheated a little bit. And so we actually removed some stuff from some levels that you could have interacted with, because it kind of just took away from the level, basically.
And that, just to point out, that's actually something that Ronnie and I comment on a lot in a lot of these games, because the moment you try interacting with something and it either you can't interact with it, or you can't, it doesn't interact the way that you want it to. I feel like that's immediately immersion breaking, because all of a sudden it's just like, yeah, you can't do what you were hoping to do, and it just kind of reminds you that you're in VR and not, Yep. So I mean, kudos on that, because I think a lot of times it gets super easy to just keep adding stuff in. It's hard to subtract, but I think there's a lot of addition by subtraction, if that makes sense. By removing those things, you're absolutely actually greatly enhancing the experience. So that was a great move, because before we even got onto this topic, one of my compliments, and I think one of the things that I even said to Ronnie during our review of the game, was that you could interact with pretty much everything. And that's always a nice feel, because it's something you don't necessarily think about. But as soon as, we're done playing the game, and I was like, oh, okay, that had such a nice feel to it, in the sense that, everything, it was just so fluid, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, and to kind of piggyback on the same topic, there are actually two other events during development that kind of fell under the category of they need to be consistent or they should be interactable. The first was actually, have you guys played the bomb defusal level where you need to strip guys?
No, I haven't, but I've stripped a lot of guys by mistake.
Yeah. Well, the name of that level is
I played it, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The name of the actual name of the scene inside the game is Naked Time, because that's what the prototype of that level was called.
Okay.
And started playing that, and the moment I played it, I was like, this needs to be everywhere in the game. And but it actually ended up serving a purpose, because we've watched people play for so long. One of the first things a lot of people do is they reach out and they want to touch the person.
Yep.
And we decided early on that it would make our lives a giant nightmare to design puzzles if you could just walk up to anybody and just knock them around. I mean, if you want, you can kind of do that with a lot of objects in the world, but we wanted to make you focus on interaction rather than just manipulating a person constantly. So we went and added this Naked Time technology, is what we called it. Currently, not creepy at all. We did draw a line, obviously. And it did end up
for everyone listening, this is still a family-friendly game.
Kind of.
It is.
Well, for everyone listening that isn't familiar with the game, Just in Time Incorporated, Justin, it's such a cool concept, but could you just lay it out for people that really don't know what it is and don't know what the game's about?
Oh, actually, yeah, we probably should have started with that, but go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, circle back.
Okay, yeah, so in Just in Time Incorporated, you are a death prevention insurance agent. And the advantage that you have, and so if people take out policies with this company to protect themselves in the event that they're going to meet their awful, horrible death, which is pretty much the scenario in every level. This would be hard to kind of prevent their death if you didn't have the ability to run at about 10 times the speed of everything else going on. So you can teleport around, grab bullets out of the air, take people's clothes off, and all sorts of other stuff, and basically try and prevent the disaster from happening. And that can be anything from, 3 Marines going to be shot by a helicopter, or, somebody's hiding a bomb, or even there's a bunch of murderous rats running around. Really, there's no limit to what this company is willing to take on for a client.
Very nice pitch.
It's both room scale that you can walk around, and because you can move faster than everyone else, it has teleportation to get to the levels. So it's kind of a great blend of both. Yeah, definitely. I found. And my biggest thing when I played the game that it just blew me away is we play a lot, like Ronnie and Zane said, we play a lot of VR games, but there's not really a catchphrase for it yet, but well-oiled polish is the best way I can describe it. Like, everything works, everything has a level of polish that you would associate with, a game that you're like, there's been a lot of thought put into this, and everything kind of goes together. The aesthetic, the design, it's fun. I know what to do. Everything kind of acts as I want, and that was the big thing that stuck out, and that was just what made it so impressive and just so cool, and just like, I want to keep playing it. I want to try it out.
Yeah, thanks. That's awesome. It was actually fun. So when we did demo the game at Comic-Con in Denver, we knew that the majority of people wouldn't have had VR experience, let alone Vive experience. And so we were a little hesitant to see, how that's going to work out. And it was surprising. We would almost just basically put the headset on, tell them, please don't run through this wall in this booth, which happened.
It was happening in my apartment when I was,
yeah,
because you're so excited.
My controllers have drywall on them. Like, I got more stuff down there.
Yeah. I think it's the telltale sign of a well-designed VR game is that you really don't have to explain a whole lot. There's some games where it seems like you have to be like, whoa, wait, you're going to have to push this button and do this, and then, oh, wait, back up. And then there's just these few gyms where it's just like, no, have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would just run people through the tutorial and give them a choice kind of one of the earlier levels, and got, people with no experience. They just, for the 95% of the time, they just get in, play, have a great time. And the other surprising thing was that with it, we had, they'd have friends with them watching. And I thought, oh, geez, they've seen this level that this guy's playing, because they've been waiting a while here, probably, 5 times. And I was like, they're probably going to want to try something else. And nope, as soon as they put the headset on, they're like, I want to play that level.
That's really funny. No, like I said, no exaggeration. You're just in time catapulted to the top of my list in terms of games that I'm going to show people when either introducing them to the Vive for the first time, or even people that have played the Vive, quite a bit. When they come over, I'm gonna launch Just in Time, because I think it's that good. I really do think, and I don't know what price point are you releasing the game at in Steam?
It's going to be $19.99 base, and then we'll have a 10% launch discount.
Okay, perfect. I just can't recommend the game enough for people out there, and we're not done with the interview yet, but I mean, it really is a game I think that every Vive owner should have in their catalog, just because, like Damon was saying, how cohesive everything is, how fun everything is, how well thought out, how clever, just everything that we've been talking about. And I guess just to go back to the theme bit a little bit, because you had mentioned briefly that you had picked the idea, you had started working on it, and you're kind of crafting everything, like all of you talked about the UI and how it progressed over the time period that you were in development, and then you said as the theme started coalescing, that was one of the things that kind of helped you to kind of finish off that UI. In regards to the theme, I mean, could you explain a little bit about how you eventually landed on this idea of Just in Time Incorporated, and kind of a lot of the ideas, the fun like parodies that you do from level to level and all that sort of stuff? Yeah,
I think so. It's going to stretch my memory a bit to remember exactly how it happened, because it ended up being so organic. I mean, I think initially, I mean, we're both huge Portal fans, and I think like there's that kind of dry humor in that, and like we had to steer far away from trying to basically copy GLaDOS, because that requires like some seriously good writing chops to not get annoying, and they nailed it. So I did some initial experiments with writing more like that, and I was like, nope, this is awful. I'm not a screenwiter. I don't want to be. I actually went the total opposite direction, which was I just wanted to lavish praise on you for doing simple things sometimes. But I think what came to mind for me early on, I think, was, I don't know if you guys have seen that. I think it's an Allstate commercial where this guy, he's always, falling and causing the accidents. He kind of represents the disaster.
Oh yeah.
It's
like
Mr.
the theme of
Chaos or whatever.
commercials. Yeah, there you go.
So I kind of like that, combined with this whole Quicksilver concept. Those kind of merged a little bit, and then we talked about it more and more, and it seemed like, well, okay, you are in these situations trying to save people, basically. So I guess maybe you work for the military or the police. I don't know. And then somehow the insurance concept, I think we brought it up just randomly in some meeting, and just thought it was hilarious. It also had the practical effect of letting us kind of have really wildly different levels and not have to really make like this explanation as to why you are doing all this random stuff. Because we really didn't want to be trapped down the corridor of, okay, we're just a combat game. It's just going to be catching bullets the whole time. You're like some secret agent or something like that. It really just evolved out of a series of like, just, hey, I think this is funny. And a lot of what would happen is, in some of these meetings, you talk, you have this great idea, you think it's hilarious, you go home, you sleep on it. The next time you meet, you're like, yeah, that's not that funny. And so the proof with this one was it was funny each time.
It has to be two mediums funny.
Yep, it has to be.
Yeah.
If you have
minimum,
and still find it funny, then you got a good chance. Good chance it's funny. And I think both of us also, I personally don't like to take myself too seriously. I think I'd have a hard time writing a serious game, so that kind of put me under some limitations from the beginning. So I was really grateful we actually stumbled on this, because that theme did really just make everything click in the end. And we were lucky in that we found it pretty early on, probably, maybe mid-November we had started talking about it. Maybe even earlier. I'm not sure.
Yeah. You're talking about inspirations. Oh, sorry, Zane.
Oh, no, I mean, I was just going to quickly comment and say, like, aside from, the mechanics, polish, everything else that we've been talking about, that theme, I feel like it might be the secret sauce of what you guys have, because the thing is, like, insurance agency, well, first off, let's go back to the whole, like, uniqueness and originality of the concept that you guys created. I mean, there's so many different titles in VR games, but I don't think there's no other title where you can play as an insurance agent. And there's probably very few games out there that you can play as an insurance agent. It doesn't sound sexy, but as soon as you throw it into the mix here, it opens up so many different wild scenarios. And what you're saying before is just like every scenario can be made in such a hilarious way because of what this main theme represents now and how broad and general that it can get. So I just want to quickly comment and say that's probably a big part of it, because I found myself, you'd go into a level and it would tell you what like your mission is supposed to be, and I would just like giggle to myself, because you're thinking about what you're actually doing in terms of like the storyline, quote unquote storyline of the game, and the ridiculousness of it sometimes just it has such a pleasant, like, it just leaves such a pleasant subliminal, like, I don't know how else to describe it, but like. Even just like the little giggles, like it was just like, oh man, this is such a cool game. Like I found myself saying that to myself every single time I'd come across like the most ridiculous concepts and scenarios that you guys put out there.
Thanks. I mean, yeah, I kind of was happy when it all came together. Just I really like that feeling of like, what the F is going on? Like, what is happening right now? Why is, like, I was fighting rats a second ago, and now I am chopping someone's head off. In a family-friendly way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you were talking about inspiration, and I wanted to just talk with you shortly about your inspiration, visually and aesthetically for the game. Yeah. What your inspirations were for it, why you guys, because Ryan had actually mentioned in an email that the visual aesthetic actually helped with the development, and how you guys came about that.
It's exceedingly pragmatic. It came down to basically there's two of us, and I'm predominantly a programmer, so I can actually make art for this style, and it fits in with the rest of the game. So Ryan's an artist, but then the problem is that the biggest challenge in making the game is actually making the fun game, which means level design, feel. And it kind of leaves the visual style off to the side a little bit. And that we've been to plenty of talks at the Game Developer Conference, and one of the recommendations is always, if you're prototyping a game, make it as ugly and Spartan as possible, because you'll fall in love with the art and not the gameplay. And we've had that happen in the past in previous games we worked on in the prototype phase, and we were like, okay, we can't do that. So it also kind of fell into place that we could find some third-party assets that we were able to purchase and kind of work that into our theme, or style by the end. So I mean, we took kind of that style and then evolved it over the course of the project, and that's why, for one example, we try to put a lot of attachments on all the characters, because we want them to feel more not just like this Minecrafty looking guy, but actually feel a little more 3D, I guess. So really, I think a lot of the art style came down to just pure pragmatism.
Well, and it serves the game really well, because
it works. It works.
Like you were saying before, I mean, along with the theme allowing you to jump from location to location and do all sorts of different types of environments, the art that you style that you ended up going with I think really allows you to do that as well. I mean, yeah, whether you're in a jungle or an office space or like everything, nothing throws you out of the situation. You never think, oh, this doesn't look, that looked like a normal office, but this now looks like an unrealistic jungle or vice versa. Like everything just kind of works in your brain.
And that's where I have to give immense credit to Ryan, because I mean, he would usually, like, my prototype levels would, be functional, and I could make some of them look good, but then I'd be like, okay, Ryan is the final decider on, make it pretty, basically. And so I would hand this level off to him, and by the time I saw it next, I'd be like, holy crap, that looks awesome. Like he did so much with what we had to work with, that it always impressed me, because it also, speaking practically, two other things kind of come to mind. One is, even though these VR headsets, the current generation, is pretty awesome. I mean, I don't think anyone would argue that the screen density is where it needs to be in the long run. So that simple art style kind of, in my opinion, lends itself to being able to see and understand the world better, because, there's the cost of some aliasing here and there is small compared to a really high fidelity game. And on top of that, we kind of kept an eye on performance for the game over development, because I didn't really want any horrific surprises by the end. But I kind of was dreading coming into April, where I knew I was going to have to sit down and do a real performance test on kind of the quote unquote low end hardware. Mm-hmm. So I built this Frankenstein box off eBay, half used parts, half new. Managed to track down the low end CPU. Booted the game up, and it just worked. And it was like the frame rate was fine. I was like, I didn't expect that. And because, we don't spend nearly as much time rendering as a higher fidelity game does, which left room for the really intense physics, because the physics take the majority of the CPU time for a frame. And,
which lead to think that pretty much the amount of people that can play it and play it well is probably just about everybody that has VR.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, I tested against it's an i5 4590 and a GTX 970, and it runs like no problem. So nice. Even if you're a bit below the Vive min spec, I think it'll still run pretty well.
Very, very cool.
I have a quick question real quick for Justin. So you had your list of 50 games Ryan came up with, and 50 games, ideas, concepts that you came up with. Could you tell us some of the absolute bottom of the barrel? The worst of the worst. The ones that you're like, this is just not going to work.
Well, I'm going to, let me pull up File Explorer right now.
And then while you're looking, some of your non-VR games that you've gotten influence from over the years, and what that you have played before, that they don't necessarily have to be a core mechanic in this game, but just where have you gotten your inspiration and your love of games from? Anything in particular?
Well, very early on, for some reason, when I said it all started at age 7, it just made me think of a story. Back in the 90s, I was really hooked on Ultima Underworld, and I was playing way too much. So my parents, they moved the computer to their bedroom, because they thought, okay, now he can't stay up late playing. So Saturday rolls around, they wake up, and me and the neighbor kid are at the edge of their bed playing Ultima Underworld. So if they didn't know I had a problem from then, they weren't paying attention. I don't know. I played so many games so many times. I mean, I even dropped out of school at one point because I was playing too many games. They thankfully got over that enough to come back and recognize that I should never play a massively multiplayer game again.
Yeah, I had a year or two of a WoW stint that was a little bit intense, but
yep, it's fun. But, oh man, everything else kind of falls off on the side.
Hey, when you think back to it, there were some moments there where you weren't in a game. Like that was
absolutely,
that was reality. That like you were with the crew, you were doing your thing. Like it's amazing actually.
Can you just imagine
Asheron's Call was my big one, and I have genuine memories from that like rank up there with real life events that happened that were like amazing or something like that.
Yeah, I agree.
It was a real experience with friends and people, and it was incredible.
No, and thinking about how that could or will hopefully translate into VR, I think is kind of what everybody's looking forward to, because sooner or later there's going to be a title like that. I think that just pulls people in such an intense way.
Yeah, I was just saying, what happens
think
when VR reaches that level, right? Or a game I
think some of it already kind of has. I still have great memories. Rec Room and Rise of the Jumbotron. That was an hour of my life just battling out with 3 other people, and I still think about it. It was great. So it totally is capable of doing it. But
yeah, I guess Star Trek Bridge Crew, I had just an amazing experience with a friend with that. I mean, I had nerd chills as I'm sitting there. He let me be the captain, and as soon as I figured out how to also tell the computer commands with voice, I legitimately felt like I was a Starfleet captain.
So cool.
And that just wouldn't happen outside of VR.
Yeah.
Just wouldn't,
Yeah, it doesn't.
So what are some of the things that you look forward to the most as a virtual reality developer, I guess we'll call you now?
I mean, I guess just as the worlds get more and more immersive, like I think, and this was kind of our hope also from the beginning with our game, is we wanted, even if we weren't able to communicate a very detailed story, we wanted to make sure that story, like you guys have been saying, is kind of implied, and you can kind of create and fill in the gaps where necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had tons of other ideas of stuff we would have loved to do. We imagined competing agencies that, you'd warp into a mission and you see this other guy who's like you warping around. Like one level idea was like ambulance chasing. You're basically trying to go get somebody else to sign a policy. And you're racing other companies to get to that guy first. And we imagine these different companies messing with each other. And so, that didn't make it into the game, but it kind of sits in the back of your head, and I think it helps you hopefully craft a bigger world. And
it almost reminds me of like a Shadow Mario from Mario Sunshine.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Hey, 3 letters, guys, DLC.
Yeah. God. There's so much stuff I would have loved. I mean, I could hold off on this game for another 2 years and just like keep adding stuff to it. But
so along those lines, then I guess what led you guys to feel like you were ready for releasing? Is it going? I can't remember if it's going to be an early access title or if you guys do have DLC in the works. Like, what's kind of the story behind that?
Or the update roadmap? Like
Yeah, I'd say so. We looked at it early on and we're like, okay, given kind of the goals with how we wanted the game to feel, we didn't want to go early access. We wanted, when we decided that we were going to ship the game, we wanted it to feel like a complete experience, because we feel like, a lot of people might see early access and just skip it. Mm-hmm. Or in my personal experience, I've just held off on some early access games. I'm like, I don't want to have ruin my first experience. And it might be years, like Slime Rancher. I waited a long time before playing that, and it was worth it. Great game. So we kind of made that decision, and I think where we cut it off, some of it was pragmatic. We were like, okay, we've invested close to a year of our life into this, and more than that, we both have families, so our monthly expenses aren't insignificant, and we wanted seeing people having a ton of fun with it, and feeling like for the kind of the average VR gamer, there's a satisfying amount of content there. We were like, okay, let's do it, and fully aware that we wanted to continue to support the game. So I mean, I've been working on a kind of we're calling it like advanced challenge train, like advanced agent training, and it's going to be more of it will actually have a leaderboard, and it's these different really compact scenarios to supposedly test your skills as an agent. Kind of a nod almost to wave shooters, but not a shooter, basically. And obviously we want to add some more levels to the game. Some of it's also, you don't know necessarily what your users as a whole want. And so maybe maybe everybody has a strong opinion of what they want to see. I'd hate to go down the route that we think is the best versus what everyone else is kind of like, hey, we would love more of this. And so I think that was a deciding point for us too.
Very interesting. I mean, I can say that everything I've played so far I really liked, and especially I thought just the yeah, the cleverness behind a lot of the scenarios that I played so far is probably the thing that left the most lasting impression. Like, the mechanics themselves are fun, and I have a really good time, but it's like the crazy, scenarios that you put us in, and the kind of the fun parodies. Like, a lot of these experiences you don't really necessarily, you've never had the opportunity to to be in the jungle trying to get someone to the chopper, or like it just a lot of the riffs on pop culture stuff I thought was really clever, and I'd love to see more and more of that. So
yeah, we definitely, I had a friend suggest a level that I thought was pretty hilarious. It's kind of a riff on The Matrix. It's actually like this guy dressed up in cosplay who thinks he's actually Neo, and he's being shot by like
he's just gonna get just annihilated, and you have to be the one that goes in there. And that's awesome. That's a really funny idea.
He'd have to have a shirt that has Keanu Reeves' face and says #1 fan.
That's really,
don't get me wrong. I love me some Keanu.
But that's so fun, because in addition to it being, I mean, you see parodies in other games, and you see movie parodies and all that kind of stuff, but I feel like you don't see that much in VR, and being able to actually be in some of those environments and some of those situations yourself and kind of playing around with the mechanics, I think is a whole new thing for a lot of people. So it's cool. It's a cool thing that you're doing.
I'd love to be able to do an Aliens level somehow too. Face huggers flying through the air.
Oh man, that would be cool.
That is by far my favorite movie of all time. So that would be awesome.
Well,
I guess actually to answer your question a second ago about what levels basically kind of sucked that we cut.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the list, and there's only a few that we like cut. So you guys, I don't know if you've seen in the kind of the hub between the different rooms and the headquarters, there's like the little atrium. To your right, there's actually a clipboard when you go in there that it's the credits basically.
Mm-hmm.
But there's 5 hidden levels.
Yeah, if you watch the credits, yeah.
Right. And so those levels actually, one of them is one of the actually legitimately a level from the very first prototype, and it's hideous and awful, but it is actually the level, and like no BS, it still worked. Put it in there.
That's so cool.
I thought that was a really great way, and for developers out there that listen, because we have a good bit of developers that listen. What an original, great way to get someone to actually watch the credits and pay attention and realize there's real people that worked in this game. For people playing VR games. I thought that was really, really unique.
And hey, if you really don't like us and you really didn't like the game, we do slide in some deadly implements for you to do with as you will. But actually, so we put I think 4 of those 5 levels are actually levels that we cut from the final list, but they were complete. Like they had an end condition, a goal. They worked, and they were fun in their own way. Some of them we actually cut because we felt they didn't take advantage, or they didn't emphasize slow motion. So it's like, oh yeah, this is fun. You're doing a lot of stuff. One level in particular started with the concept of a hippie on a log going through a sawmill, and you have to manipulate these mechanisms to get him safely to his truck so his hippie friends can escape with him. And I enjoyed it. A lot of people enjoyed it, but there was no reason that you needed slow time. So we're like, nope, cut it. But it's still fun, so we threw it in the credits.
That's cool.
And all the other levels kind of are like that. And I think I believe I kind of put a little explanation on there as to why it was cut. But we thought it was just fun to throw that in as some extra credit, basically, and play some of the things that could have been in the game. So we really only cut a few levels that didn't make it. One, it looked beautiful. It's called the camping level, and it's this kind of lumberjack looking guy almost camped out in the middle of the woods, and you just hear this bear like running through the woods, and next thing you know, he kind of pops out randomly and is going to maul the guy, and it's a beautiful level. But what we found when we'd play it and other people would play it is it was just so simple to solve that we were like, it didn't have enough, and so we cut it. I think we had a lot of problems we ran into. Actually, we'd have these ideas, and we just end up fighting against the physics library, because we use Unity the game engine, and the physics library, with the way we had to actually implement slowed down time, it broke a lot of stuff. For instance, bouncing doesn't work because we have to scale the velocity everything's going, and you just lose the bouncing. And then physics joints don't work well, only under very specific situations. So Ryan made another level that you were saving a climber who was falling through the air because his carabiner broke, and it relied on physics joints, and it bugged out. And so we're like, yep, gotta cut it.
So how
we ran into stuff like that a lot.
In some of those situations, like when you said that bouncing doesn't work, and I'm not a developer, so I don't know like exactly whether or not this was bouncing or not, but I recall the inflatable
The fire
those kind of bouncing around. Like, how did you
if I could show you the code as to how that thing actually works, it is some of the hackiest, gross I've ever made as a developer, and it worked.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, like, I recalled those bouncing, so I was like, oh, they must have found a workaround.
Yeah, it is some serious gross code.
But it works.
I made that level, and because I knew how gross it was, I know the exact ways to break it, even just because I made it. I wrote it off as like, there's not a chance this level's making it into the game. I hand it off to Ryan, plays it, and he's like, holy crap, that level's awesome. And I go, really? Like, no, it sucks.
Like I mentioned before, we do have a good bit of developers that listen, especially to people that are just starting. If you could give some just advice as to, if you're just starting and you're getting into developing, especially for VR, what would be your advice?
So I've had an opportunity here. So I mean, we're in Colorado. I've had an opportunity to mentor a few people who are doing like kind of a game dev boot camp, like one of those kind of 12-week courses and stuff like that. And I've met a lot of people at meetups who are trying to get into making games. And my first point of advice is, and this is true even if you're professional, it's limit your scope. I've met somebody before who really thought that he had this idea for a massively multiplayer online game, and me and a friend were just like, can you bring this down so that it would be fun as a single player experience? And he was really dead set in the MMO, and I'm, as a developer, I'm like, oh man, I'm sorry, that's never going to happen. Like, it's just not, especially if you don't have any experience yet. And so, I mean, limiting scope is just as important for somebody new versus somebody who's been developing for a long time. You have to really stop and think, like, what is the core of your game, and how can I get there as fast as possible? And so that kind of falls into the second point, which is your goal. Kind of your main goal is find that fun as fast as possible and write gross code or whatever you have to do, and then get it in the hands of people and find out, hey, is it fun? Because odds are, you might have this idea of what the game is. You watch other people play, and maybe not even what they say, but you see how they play it, and all of a sudden it triggers kind of a new idea, and you change the game a little bit. So doing that as fast and as early as possible, and just kind of iterating like that, will help you find kind of the game that you actually wanted to make. I guess the third, more maybe practical piece of advice is, I guess it depends. If you have programming experience, then, I mean, Unity is pretty easy to jump into, and there's some great libraries. I mean, the prototype that our game is built off of early on, we used a version of Newton VR, which kind of gives you pretty decent ability to interact with objects physically. And that was a great jumping off point. I mean, we've hacked it to pieces at this point to work inside the game, but it was a great starting point. And so there's a lot of packages out there that are free that kind of get you off the ground. My other advice, and I would even argue for a programmer this is still true, is that there's some visual scripting tools for Unity. One in particular is called Playmaker. You can build like some serious games in that. So Ryan is not a programmer; he's predominantly an artist, but he early on when he was prototyping, he got really good at using Playmaker, and I was like seriously impressed with the stuff he was able to build with this, to the point where I kind of came down off my developer programmer high horse and was like, all right, I'll give this a shot and see how it works. And to me, it's an indispensable tool now, because you can iterate very quickly and visually kind of inspect some of the more, some of the more complicated interactions between things. So for instance, like the full tutorial sequence, is for the most part controlled by this just one very large finite state machine in Playmaker. But it's easy to understand because it's very linear. And building that initial tutorial level took so much iteration that when I think about what it would have been like if it had been in code, I wouldn't have been able to change it nearly fast enough. So I mean, that would be my advice too: is don't be afraid of using as many third-party tools as possible. But there's also it's a great time to try and get into this kind of stuff because there are so many great tutorials, like just so many great tutorials. I mean, these game engines used to cost a fortune, or they didn't exist. So I mean, we're really in like a really lucky time to be a developer or wanting to become one.
Absolutely.
Cool.
No,
Thank
solid
you.
advice, especially that first one kind of rings a bell. I mean, there's nothing wrong with ambition, but I think sometimes the most simple things are the most effective, right? So just being able to build on the fundamentals, like you said, especially for people starting out. I'm not a developer, so I hope I'm not coming across as trying to tell people what to do, but it just rings a bell for me in and outside of VR where, I mean, start small and then build on there. And I feel like a lot of the games that we've come across that have had simple concepts, but we're just so effective in executing them, are the games that have stuck with us up until now. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Ronnie.
Yeah, no, I definitely would.
So, well, Justin, we want to be respectful of your time. We got a couple more questions for you, if that's all right, though.
Yeah, shoot.
Well, so the first one, I think we were kind of talking about it a little bit earlier, but maybe just more directly. This game is coming out July 27th. I'm in the wrong month. And this is going to be airing on the release date. So
what you're saying is the game is out.
the game
It's out right
game
now.
is
It
out.
came out. It just came out.
It just came out. So well,
I clicked on Steam. It shows it's ready for release. Purchase it for $19.99 minus 10% off. Right, Justin?
Or purchase 10 copies. I mean, give them to
There
your
you go.
friends and
Yeah,
family.
you can gift them.
Steam gifts.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
I
So
agree.
for everyone
I
listening,
couldn't better said.
this game is out now. Make sure you check it out. I hope you've we've been able to convince you, just Ronnie and I and Damon from talking on here. But Justin, my question for you is, what's next for Second Wind Interactive? I mean, looking down the road, what are you guys looking to do within VR, maybe outside of VR? Just curious what the next step for you guys is after creating a game that is at least it's well received by everyone on this call, and I'm sure everyone else that will be trying it at some point.
Well, I mean, I guess actually I'd say, so one thing, we've kind of have this unspoken agreement, me and Ryan, that we've refused to talk about other game ideas because, kind of when you're in there's that middle slump when you're making a game where you actually, even if the game is fun, you genuinely are sick of it and you don't want to work on it. And it's like, it happens around the 70% point. You get through that little dip and then you're like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, let's finish this. But at that point it's like this temptation. All of a sudden you have the most amazing ideas. Like so many ideas are flowing and everything sounds exciting. But we've kind of not talked that with each other. I'm sure he's had a ton of ideas on the side too. But frankly, I mean, plans for us are to make this game better, address anything people are talking about. We would like to get it ideally. I mean, if it does well enough and we can afford to keep working on it, we'd want to get it on Oculus and PlayStation just to maximize, who can actually try it.
This would be great on PSVR. I mean, this would be great.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
it's definitely going to be a lot of work. There's some mechanics that we'll have to rethink or add on. I mean, you kind of take for granted in the Vive that you can just turn around or reach down. You've got this accurate room scale experience. So we've kind of talked about adding almost like kind of a force pull mechanic so that you're not forced to bend down, which frankly might just even make the Vive game more satisfying. I mean, if you're like 6'5", if you need to bend down to pick something up off the ground and you have to do it quite a bit, you get a little annoyed in VR. I've seen it happen.
And I mean,
force pull might help.
And even in room scale, like even if you have a pretty big play space, if you're starting to become frantic and you don't really teleport and instead you're moving to the edge of the square and then trying, like eventually if you're reaching for stuff too quickly, you sometimes hit stuff or like, so I could see where it could be useful.
Or that cord gets so tangled that it can't turn.
It's happened many times before.
And you,
First world
Justin,
problems.
you'd mentioned before that there's a big contest going on.
Yes.
with the game?
I mean, it's the Just in Time Incorporated giveaway extravaganza. Maybe it's a little overblown, but the grand prize, and it will run through launch weekend. The grand prize is we're going to make you a blocky character so that you can take out all your self-hatred on yourself as much as you want, or invite friends to the game. Free copy of the game, of course, Steam gift cards. We still have a few, because we've kind of been doing it over the course of the month. We still have some Steam gift cards, and then we're also giving away 5 free copies of the game. So
how do you join?
If you go to our Twitter is the easiest way to find it. But it's justintimegame.com/giveaway.
Okay.
Sweet.
Cool. Well, actually, this leads right into our last question, and which is, where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? I'm sure you're going to have a lot of fans probably offering level ideas just based on this interview and based on all this,
everybody you meet,
all the crazy stuff. But we'll make sure. So we'll make sure to link to the game on Steam, and I'll also add that link that you just mentioned for the giveaway. But I don't know if there's any. You mentioned Twitter, but any other social media or forums or Reddit or something like that you guys would want to connect with fans?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna keep an eye. Predominantly, I mean, Twitter's kind of a great place. Like, we put a lot of GIFs on there and stuff like that, which it's cool to see a lot of that. Facebook is a great place to kind of interact with us. But we're going to be keeping
the Twitter handle Just in Time?
Just in Time VR.
Cool. Okay, I'll make sure to add that in.
And going to be keeping a very close eye on the Steam Community Hub. I mean, I think that's a big one. Obviously, the Vive subreddit, and I think that's probably about as much as we can handle. But I mean, I really do want to be as kind of interactive with the community as possible, because I mean, these games tend to kind of live and die by people's opinions and how they feel about the game. And you know, it's like we saw with the tutorial failing early on. It's like, you know, if enough people are having an issue, it's not their problem, it's ours. So I would want to address that, and the only way you find that out is by people telling you. So
no, fair
I'm going to
point,
try and keep as good of an eye in there as possible.
Well, I can say, yeah, Just in Time really left a strong impression on me, and that's coming from someone that plays a lot of these games. So thank you so much for all of the time and effort that you've put into the game. And you know, from all of us here, I think we genuinely wish you the best and hope for a successful launch of the game.
Well, thanks for having me on. And it's great to hear when people love playing the game. I mean, it feels good. So thanks.
Good. Well, it's well deserved. Justin, thanks again. We do appreciate the time, man. And like Ronnie said, best of luck with this. And I mean, hopefully we'd love to see what you guys have coming down the pipeline in the future, if and whenever you guys have that conversation.
Yeah, we'll be sure to let you know.
Cool. Well, take care. We'll talk soon.